I'd like to call the meeting to order. I heard a natural lull happen, so I thought that would be a good opportunity to begin the meeting. We do have quorum. I'd like to welcome everybody to the 40th meeting of the Budget Committee, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'd like to welcome all the members of the committee and the members of council, and of course the public and the media. And we acknowledge that we are meeting today on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and home to many diverse Indigenous peoples. As usual, I'd like to remind everyone that you can watch the proceedings of the Budget Committee today on YouTube or at Toronto City Council Live, or you can watch it at toronto.ca/council. Members and staff and people here, we have a sundown clause today being Friday, so we have to be finished at 3:30 p.m. So I'm going to discuss that in just a second about how I'm looking at trying to manage the day and trying to get through that. But we do have a sundown clause of 3:30 p.m. today. So first of all, are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none. So today is the first wrap-up meeting where we're going to start to put together all the pieces of the 2018 budget. And I just want to remind members that if you do have motions, and primarily motions for any briefing notes that may come out of the questions or discussions today, that if you can get them into the clerks as soon as possible, as I've asked throughout the entire process, that will allow the clerk to sort of review them to make sure that they would be fine to move at the end of the day. Again, you have every opportunity to do other motions on the budget. I would request, we won't be moving any motions today. We won't be speaking on the budget as we have done in past. That we will do at the final wrap-up on the 23rd. But there will be briefing note motions moved today on that, so if you could do that. We're going to defer any other decisions till the 23rd. No, not moved in. There we go. So actually I have up on the screen. So to be able to facilitate getting done today at 3:30, I'm going to be moving a motion which is really limiting questions to 3 minutes and speaking to 3 minutes. I'll play it by ear. Let's see how the day goes. In the event that we need to do, say, a second round, more than willing to do that. But again, I'm just trying to make sure that at the beginning of the meeting, we can ensure that we could get done by 3:30. I don't want to have to get to 2 o'clock and realize that we have a lot of work to do. So this is just to help facilitate that. And we'll see how the day goes. As I said, if we need to do 2 rounds, we could potentially do 2 rounds. But this gives us the opportunity to try to get through the agenda today. So I'm going to move that motion.
Quick question, before we vote on the motion, is that per cluster, per division, just so that people can start figuring themselves out?
Josie's going to be going through the all the briefing note requests that we received. There's a couple of reports, so there'll be questions on each one of those. We have
I see what you mean.
Okay, so we have, when we get to the final part, we have done in years past, we do final questions on the clusters.
Right.
And again, so that's where, let's see how things go. It'll depend on the amount of questions. I want to give a bit of flexibility, so in the event that we need a second round yes, you're right, some of the clusters may need more questions, but I just want to get a sense. Last year we were fine. We didn't seem to need that extra, but again, I'm just, because of the time commitment, I'm a little just trying to play it by ear, but let's see how the day goes. Yeah. Yeah, so ideally, as we, again, just when we're looking at the 2 wrap-up meetings, the best moving forward is an opportunity by the end of the day to finish where we've had an opportunity to ask questions on all of the clusters by the end of today. But again, it's a little different this year because of the 3:30 timeline. Let's just sort of play it by ear, and we'll make a determination by the end of the day on what we do. Anyway, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, so what we're going to do now, I'll move it over to Josie Levita, and as you recall, she will kind of guide us through and now does everybody have the packages that have been delivered? I believe it'll be blue sheets and green sheets. The capital is first. Josie will guide us through that, and I'll really pass it over to you, and we'll just see how things go.
Thank you, Chair. So I just have the councillors' attention so we can just be clear about what documents we're working with. So we have the blue sheets, which refers to the summary of briefing notes and reports in front of you as it relates to the capital budget and plan. And then you have a much thicker document, which are the operating wrap-up notes, which are the green sheets, which deal with the operating budget briefing notes and reports that are before you. You also have received a package of all the briefing notes that were requested and have been submitted. Now, they were submitted over the last 24 hours, so what you have are hard copies at the moment, and then my understanding is that they'll be posted later on this morning. There is also a confidential package, as two briefing notes have some confidential attachments associated with those.
There's a rather short table of contents. There's an
Operating behind it, right. So just so we're crystal clear then, this package here on the top page identifies first the table of contents and the briefing note numbers for those related to the capital. And if you go past, I think it's really one briefing note that is new to the issuance. So we're just keeping a full record of all the briefing notes issued for both budget processes. So if you go past that, about 4 pages in, there's a table of contents that has all your operating briefing notes. And anything that's marked new is what you have since received that are brand new to the process that was requested as a result of the last round of meetings.
Yeah, the pagination's kind of not helping us.
So you have a very thick document here, which are all the briefing notes, okay?
Where does operating start?
Operating starts right after the first, there's a table of contents for capital. There's briefing note number 7. Briefing note number 7 has 4 pages, and then you have the table of contents for operating.
Got it.
Okay? And just as you follow in the left-hand side, you will see where we have identified the briefing note number. And if it says new, that means that's brand new to you as a committee and as members of council, because these are a result of what was requested from the last meeting. These are posted as we speak. They're being posted. So the task for today is I'm going to guide you through this. So the first step is we're going to start with capital, and we're going to identify any briefing note requests. I'm going to give you a summary of that, and I know you have not read it, so you have opportunity. All staff are here to answer questions, but I'll provide you a summary. So staff will guide you through, and if you feel that there is a need for additional time on it, then we can identify those for the next round. Okay?
Yeah, Councillor, as I said, there will be a bit of flexibility because of this. So let's just, as we go through today, let's see how things are. Again, you may be fine when Josie does the explanation, and we may not have any other questions, but let's just see how we do as we go through the day. Councillor Davis?
An honorary member, thank you. I know in the past when briefing notes have been dropped on the table that the new ones got pushed to the afternoon so that there was at least a lunchtime opportunity to read, and then the old ones were dealt with first.
And
just an idea.
Here's the challenge, Councillor, is it because we have to be, I think last year we finished at 5 o'clock and that actually worked, but we have to be done by 3:30 today.
Oh.
So that puts a bit of more of a wrinkle in this. So that's why I understand your concern. So let's, as we move forward, let's just see how things go. But yeah, I mean, that's the challenge. I would have loved to say after lunch, but again, after lunch, we have literally 2 hours. So.
It's just not fair.
Yeah, I understand that, and I know it was just a challenge to getting all the information here. So let's proceed with Josie, and we'll just, again, let's just see how things go. Councillor Campbell, you okay?
Yeah, no, I mean, I certainly agree with Councillor Davis. I mean, to have this amount of information, put before us right now, and is this going to be our only opportunity to ask questions on these briefing notes, or will we have an opportunity the next time we convene?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm sure councillors will have some follow-up questions to the information just received today.
Now, again, so where we do have an opportunity is in the end, as I said, let's see how things go, but we do have the opportunity with a final wrap-up, and that's why we have sometimes a final wrap-up, is to ensure, so there will be other briefing note requests. I know 2 or 3 that are coming out of today. In the final wrap-up, we'll be asking questions on those briefing notes, of course. So if there are other briefing notes that we have here that we may need to ask more questions. I understand. So we're not making any decisions today. Okay. So we will have more flexibility. The next meeting will have a longer time. So if we do need to ask more questions on briefing notes, we will be able to do that. So I don't want to suggest that once we've gotten through this, that's it. Have more opportunity. I'll try to build in for the next meeting a bit more opportunity.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So through you, Mr. Chair, some briefing notes are quick and short and will provide the kind of answers that you're looking for, and others probably will need a bit more time to delve into. So we will keep record at the end of the day of those things that you want further discussion on for the next meeting.
I mean, I do have to say, when you go to the website and look at the agenda, or even the agenda for this committee, the number of links that go on and on and on, and revised analyst notes, and it is overwhelming. I don't know how anyone out there could possibly navigate through this. But anyway, that's my editorializing for now. Thank you.
So through you, Mr. Chair, we hope that the wrap-up notes help bring the pieces together, so we will use this as the guide to help navigate by divisional issues. Okay. So we're going to start with capital, which are the blue sheets. And just for everyone's information, on the front page, we've done a financial impact summary. So what it shows you is the 10-year capital plan as of December 18th. And then you have either briefing notes that provide information or reports that identify, as we go through this, other financial implications. And if we were to address all of these would be the values of those. So we will deal with them one by one, but that's just a summary for you. Okay? So the first section, starting on page 2 to page 6, really is just a record of what the committee either had before it or requested as part of its deliberations back in December. And it essentially just says that all these items were deferred to today's meeting. So really the operative page for everyone to start on is page 7, and we'll start going through all the different pieces. So at the top of page 7, we had a briefing note that we distributed back in December, which was a summary of the state of good repair backlog for the City of Toronto. It brought together information based on what the impact, based on the 10-year capital plan before you, and what impact that capital plan has on our backlog as a result of the preliminary funding that's built into, the SOGR funding that's built into the 10-year capital plan. It was also in the presentation when we launched the budget, and what it identified as a city as a whole, that based on our state of good repair funding of over $13 billion, that we would be bringing down the backlog if the plan stayed intact from about 11% of total asset value to 8.6%. And while that potentially masks some of the areas that we are aware that are going up, we have also said that in those areas that are going up, like Toronto Public Library, that we will be placing a laser focus on those things in the next year's capital program. Because this year our priority was really to address the Toronto community housing backlog requirements. So that's capital briefing note number 6, but that was issued to you prior. So if there are any questions about backlog, now would be the time.
Any questions? Can I just possibly have some of the background chatter just to bring down? It's hard to hear. So are there any questions on this briefing note?
Well, I just wanted to
Councillor-
ask, facilities and real estate had fallen behind as well significantly. Will this bring them to achieving their state of good repair level, to levels similar to the other departments, divisions?
So through you, Mr. Chair, the one area that we were able to provide additional investment in was for all their AOTA compliance. So that was our priority this year. So there's about 190 million that we've placed over the 10 years to deal with all the facilities that they dealt with. So that was our priority for this year, but they still have challenges, particularly in their fire stations and other areas. But that was the piece that we wanted to get in this year.
And do we anticipate that will cover? I recall a number of 250 million needed for accessibility, AODA requirements.
Yeah, we've been year by year, we had been investing some of that 250 in the last couple of budget cycles. This is the residual, was 190, Marco, 192 that we actually placed in the entire plan. So they have to go off and finish all their audit work, but you know, if there's more that's required based on the final audits, we will then get that information. But we wanted to provide that capacity.
Just finally, PFNR's capital plan for next year, which is going to have to incorporate the facilities master plan. Can you remind us how it is that we are going to do that? Because I've been raising this for 10 years, actually. That's how long we've been waiting for the master plan. And that I've been told every year we can't build capital in any reserve for projects that we're not aware of. And so there was never any money put aside in anticipation of the PFNR master plan.
So through you, Mr. Chair, now that we have a master plan, I believe that that plan identified that a lot of their new facility requirements were built in for the first 10 years. And the issue for us will be, again, trying to figure out strategically where the SOGR requirements are for that plan and what we need to fund. So that'll be part of our 19 budget process now that we have a plan to work from. So they have SOGR built in, and we are.
But is the SOGR at a level that's addressed so that it's not still growing?
No, it is still growing in certain areas. So in the past, we did put dedicated funding into some of the high visibility areas like community centers and pools and arenas, but they still have more need. And as they continue to do more audits, we'll find out more.
This is one of the areas that will be a challenge for next year, I presume?
That's
and
correct.
Which other areas?
So in the briefing note, what it identifies is the areas are parks, forestry, and recreation, libraries, as we talked about, facilities management, and TTC, state of good repair.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions on this briefing note? Seeing none, okay.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the next one is a briefing note that deals with both operating issues and capital issues. So there was a request, there was a report, so now we're into reports that deal with our capital program. So as I think everyone is aware, we had a report at our December meeting dealing with the shelter infrastructure plan and progress report. I'm on page 7 under cluster A items. And what it asked for is, and as you know, we funded $10.6 million out of the page 7, Councillor.
Sorry, I'm looking at the counter service review, budget item 39.1, briefing note request. It says adopted. Am I on the wrong page?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sorry, my mistake. Yes, you're correct. So there is a briefing note. It's briefing note number, it's in this package that you just received, briefing note number 7.
I asked for this one.
Yes, you did.
I want to look at it, and I do want to read it. This has been outstanding for 10 years, too.
It's the first briefing note in the package you just received, because this is brand new.
Yeah. 5. But we didn't deal with 5.
Right, so we're on page 9. So what this briefing note does is it identifies a series of actions that are underway as a result of the strategy that is being delivered. It's page 9 of the briefing notes.
They're not numbered.
Page 9 on the blue sheets.
Yes, they are. At the top right-hand corner, it says BN number 7.
And I cannot find BN number 7.
It's right after the first page of the table of contents. Is this a capital briefing note?
Mine says contributions to and withdrawals from the reserve accounts.
It's the package that was just delivered,
This one?
the big one, yeah.
Oh, this one is loose.
No, it's not loose. Okay,
Okay, capitals before the table of contents.
no, it's not.
So page 2.
Page 2?
Okay,
Okay, so there are 3 specific strategies that are underway. The first being that 311 Toronto is in the first phase of implementing a customer relation management technology. It's working with Toronto Water and MLS, and that has been built into the capital plan. The second element to this strategy is work that's being done to migrate services from the service counters located within the city, within civic centers to what we call digital channels by 2022. So that's moving from traditional things like telephone encounter to online and mobile. And so that work has begun, with the first set to be done by the first quarter of 2018. And the third piece is looking at migrating services to 5 integrated counters called Toronto at Your Service that will include self-service terminals.
I just want to know why we're not dealing with this that I've got to move this as a budget note. Is this coming to committee so that we can actually have a chance to talk about what this means in terms of services to our civic centers?
So through you, Mr. Chair, Gary, you want to answer that?
Through the chair, we could definitely meet afterwards and have a detailed conversation around the services and what have you, and what it means to the customer experience. I know you haven't been given the opportunity to review the briefing note as of yet, and I know that creates a little bit of anxiety. So we could definitely meet in another format to have the conversation around that.
No, I'm asking, why would this work that's being done, is it going to be reported to committee, to Government Management Committee?
Through the chair, yes, it will be.
When?
We'd have to look into that particular timeline to confirm. I just don't want to give you an improper date.
So what this says is that any of the technology required to do this is in the budget.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's saying that there is technology in the capital plan to support the delivery of the strategy. There are 3 components to that strategy. One is technology, one is countering, and the other one is bringing together these
So I asked, is the money in the budget?
Yes.
This is the capital side. I have no idea on the operating side, so maybe we'll find out when we get to the operating side if there are operating impacts and when this implementation is intended to go into place. I have no idea about the implementation of this, so we should move on, but this is not the way to learn about these things. You're just telling me, though, the capital required for the new technology to support the customer service strategy and the new service delivery model is in the budget.
I believe what I highlighted was that the first piece, which is capital, it's over a 3-year period with a pilot being done with Toronto Water and MLS. The second piece, which is migrating services from the counters to digital, will be completed by 2022.
So does that mean taking from the counters, are we no longer going to have customer service counters? The idea that we were always working on is we were going to have customer service counters. They were going to be integrated. They were going to be generalized staff who could answer questions on a whole range of things. They were going to be cross-trained. There was going to be money in the budget on both the operating and capital side, and it was going to be done in 2010.
And on page 10, it talks about the integrated, 5 integrated Toronto at Your Service branded counters on the wrap-up notes, which is summarizing the briefing note, that work has begun. The timing and completion of that, Gary, I would need your help on.
Through the chair, in terms of the counters and what have you, there is an endeavor to start the initial pilot as of the end of next year into 2019 with the physical construction of that. In regards to the CRM, the pilot will be implemented by Q2 of this particular year. We'll come back with the findings of that. And regarding to moving things online, we've already started that endeavor, and we expect to move almost 17 services during this year onto the online platform.
Okay, I'm interested in the counter service model, and I will talk to you because I still want human beings at our counters. So I'll talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Any other Councillor Carroll questions?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, but there was a note of surprise about this going to the whole Toronto at Your Service, which is the counter piece. We're not trying to be difficult, but we're just shocked that we're hearing about it here, and government management hasn't looked at it and said, oh, that sounds like a nice program, let's proceed. So it must be in the schedule. When is it scheduled to tell government management they have this wonderful counter program called Toronto at Your Service?
Through the chair, I know that we had that discussion through the GMC vehicle in 2015, in which we talked about this particular service, and we've had ongoing conversations around that.
They did.
Yes.
Okay, so it has been to committee. It's not a matter of it going to committee in future. And if we receive the briefing note today, and then 44 councillors whose residents go to these Toronto at Your Service counters based on where they live, if there's tweaking that needs to be done, will they come to budget and be told, too bad, so sad, they already received the briefing note? Or will they have an opportunity for input? Or have they already had that opportunity?
Through the chair, they've had the opportunity, and they will continue to have the opportunity. We're not doing this in isolation. And we're making sure that their government, their resident-centric initiatives to make sure we get their needs and wants in consideration. So to be very clear, the counters will not disappear. They'll just change in terms of their delivery model. We're going to want to make sure that instead of having 44 spread counters with different levels of services and what have you, there's going to be a consistent delivery of that service in 5 agreed-upon areas.
So these 5 integrated Toronto at Your Service branded counters are the direction of Government Management Committee. And are they or are they not?
Through the chair, yes, they are.
So these are the direction of Government Management Committee, and my 90-year-old dad can go there if he wants to.
Absolutely, through the chair.
Okay, thank you. I'm good. I'm ready to receive.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from
That's not what he said.
committee members? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next.
Okay. Everybody with me? You guys okay over there? Okay. So we're back to page 7. Now there's a budget briefing note. It's number 22 on the operating side because it's dealing both with operating and capital. I'm sorry, but this is why the packages are. I know. So so if you flip through, as soon as these things are posted, you'll be able to click in. But yeah.
This is
The white sheets.
Right. So as you know, at council in December, there was council approved funding of $10.6 million from the tax stabilization reserve to bring forward additional spaces for shelter use. We were also asked to report back on what would be the cost of adding 3 new shelter sites at 100 beds per site, so 300 beds. So we have a briefing note here that talks about both the operating and the capital costs. So from a capital perspective, budget briefing note number 22, and we could probably just deal with the issue in its entirety because the operating side is sitting in the operating wrap-up notes. So if people can move to that one, there's a table on page 2 of the briefing note that essentially is identifying the cost. So what's being proposed for 3 sites, 2 of which would be acquired and 1 which would be leased. The capital costs to acquire and to construct and to deal with the 3rd site from a renovation perspective is $44 million, with an average land cost of about $10 million and about $7.1 million to bring it up to use. On the operating side, for this year, to run 3 sites, it's about 1.9, almost $2 million. On average, it's about $4 million to run a 100-bed site. So you're seeing the financial implications over 2 years. And to do the capital work, we would have to place that because it's not in the 10-year capital plan. So there would be debt servicing associated with the $44 million of additional debt. So what we have on the capital side is $44 million, and on the operating, $2.6 million this year, an additional $12.2 million next year in operating costs. So
let me, okay, look, I'll begin with committee members and we'll go to the outside just to get a bit of order here. So Councillor Carroll and then Mahevik.
Well, it's probably the same question everyone has. So the briefing note tells us what budget impacts there are going to be, but all we're being asked to do today is to move a motion to receive for information. Are the funding sources and the budget adjustments, are staff going to propose funding sources since they were charged to do this, or are they not here because we're expected to find them?
So, through Mr. Chair, what we're essentially saying is the cost to run the shelter will be added to your list of your $41 million. And to do the capital costs, we will have to borrow additional debt, which has an operating impact. So this adds to your list of things that need to be funded as you deliberate on the final decisions of the budget.
Okay.
What's not funded to date.
But are you adding them to our list and saying, go your best, lick councillors, you propose something to take out of the budget, or is staff going to propose a funding source?
The only funding source we were able to propose is the capital side, but on the operating side, that will be part of, there is no specific funding source for this particular item. So it goes on the list with the $41 million.
That'll be up to the budget committee to determine on the 23rd.
Okay.
Councillor Mahevik.
Just building on that, our task today is really just to understand this. Okay, so we understand this. Then my next question is the issue has, let's say, evolved since this request has come forward in, I think it was the beginning of December that this request came forward from council. And I have a request for an additional briefing note to look at, for example, the post-April 15th strategy, given that a number of respite centers were opened, it was found to be inadequate, more were opened, and there are 600, 700 folks sleeping in respite centers, and they are due to close on April 15th. So there's that piece. So that's just going to be an additional briefing note, and then we don't need to move anything now, we just need to understand it. I understand it. Life is good. Okay, thank you, thank you. Yeah. I think I've answered my own questions with your nods. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other committee members? Councillor Campbell.
So it makes reference to sites and land costs. Have sites been identified?
Through the chair, there are a number of sites that we're working with real estate on. We've been going through a very extensive review of all sites across the city. We started that with the George Street Revitalization Project. So there are sites that have been identified.
Okay, and given the recent, challenge that we had, I mean, has staff determined how much going forward we will need, or is it assumed that we will need 2 sites or 3 sites or 1 site?
10.
So through the chair, we know that over the last year, there's been a 30% increase in demand in the system. It's very difficult to project what that demand might be going forward. Last night, we had approximately 5,600 people in the shelter system and 400 other folks in respite. So, so we know that there is a demand out there. To be able to nail it down to a specific number is very challenging. There isn't any data to support that, other than what the current demand is today.
So this talks about capital cost estimates of $44 million that's not in the budget. And now the George Street revitalization is now in the 10-year capital plan, is it not?
Through the chair, that's correct.
And what is the total cost of the George Street revitalization?
Just round numbers, approximately $500 million.
$500 million, okay. Okay. And when is the capital completion date for that?
I believe that 2024.
Okay. And when that is completed, will that add capacity, or will that just be the same capacity that we have now?
Through the chair, that does not add capacity. That takes down the current Seton House site and replaces it with a different, more modernized model that better cares for the individuals.
Got it. Okay. Thanks for the answers.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mahevik, quickly.
Just to confirm, because it's been out there, the briefing note number 22 adds a bunch of money. That is not money, that is additional new money. These are not the 3 sites that you have identified for George Street revitalization. That's already in the base.
Through the chair, that is correct. The reference to George Street revitalization was just the process that we've been going through to look at all available sites across the city.
And if I remember that community development and recreation report, there were 3 scheduled to open in 2018 for the George Street revitalization.
Through the chair, that's correct.
So
Sorry, through the chair, it's 2019 that there's 3 sites that are scheduled to open for George Street.
Oh, for George Street, I see. Okay, none in 2018.
There is 1 identified in 2018.
So the net new, sorry, not the net new, the package together in 2018 right now is 4 new sites to be opened in 2018.
So through the chair, there will be 5 sites that are open in 2018. One of those sites is a GSR identified site.
And then 3 are from this if we pass this as council. What's the last one?
That would be 8 in total with these 3. So the 5 that you just referred to are Hope that just opened,
Oh, I see, okay.
Egal, Youth Link, Runnymede, and Birchmount.
Right, okay. Okay, I think I get it. Thanks.
Councillor Fletcher, you had questions.
Yes, there have been 2 things. One, for the Hope Shelter, that originally was 120 beds on McCall Street. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
And now it's 60 beds. So on Leslie.
That's
So we're
correct.
down 60 beds that have to be replaced somewhere from the original McCall Street shelter.
Through the chair, we did add incremental beds in the system to bring that back up. Just as an example, 55 at Maxwell Meehan. So we did use that operating money to maintain that number.
Okay, but those wouldn't be up to the same level of standard as the Hope Shelter maximum.
The new Hope Shelter is part of the new pilot, and yeah, we want to get all of the shelters up to that standard over time.
So the other thing is you're estimating these 3 shelters each at 100 beds. I don't believe they're all at 100 beds. Am I right?
Through the chair, that would depend on the sites that we find, Councillor.
So currently you have indicated you have a couple of sites that you found. Are they at 100 beds?
Through the chair, I would say that all 3 sites actually are large and would be in that range if we were able to acquire all 3 of them.
So the least site, is that at 100 beds?
We have to get in and do a fulsome review of it, but it appears to be yes.
So those are all not ones that are in the pipeline right now?
That's correct.
And the new shelter standards call for anywhere between 60 to 80 beds, not 100 any longer.
That's correct.
How is this meeting the new shelter standards that we've established at 100 beds?
So this was a motion that was brought forward at council to get the 300 beds, the 3 sites at 100 each.
But since we no longer cite 100 beds, how does that jibe with the new shelter standard if we're setting up new shelters?
So staff can keep it within the 90. We can do that.
Sorry, I don't understand that.
So the briefing note asked to bring forward 3 sites at 100 beds each. We brought that briefing note forward. That is correct that the target is 90.
It's 90, I thought it was between 60 to 80 in the new standard. Having worked on it, that's my understanding.
We'll take a second look at that, Councillor.
Came through community development and was approved.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no other questions on this, Councillor Davis had questions?
Just so I understand the hope, the 5 you identified, how many of those are simply replacement, and how many beds are new? Because I know Birchmount's a replacement, Hope's a replacement.
120. Yeah, what's the number? 121 are new, and the remainder are replacement.
What's the remainder?
170.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, we'll move on to the next.
Okay. So now we're jumping to page 11 of the blue sheets, to the next item that's before committee. So this will be a motion that we will need to bring forward for consideration in the next meeting. But this is just, we've been advised that Toronto Public Health, who has a project in their 10-year capital plan slated for completion in 2018, has just received a little bit of additional money, about $19,000 from the province. And so when we come to the end of our deliberations, we will have to amend the budget to reflect the additional funding from the provincial government. Okay?
Okay, any questions on that item?
All right. Page 12.
Page 12.
So you have a report on the agenda before you, which is reporting out on the results of the 3rd year of the 3-year participatory budgeting pilot that the city has. So 2017 results are outlined in report. It identifies 14 community improvement projects that have been approved through the community, and so this is the request to amend the budget. So we reflect those 14 projects in 2 budgets, one in Parks, Forestry and Recreation, $690,000. On the blue sheets on page 12, it actually lists all the different projects that have been added, and these are all being funded from the Parkland Acquisition Reserve, as well as from transportation for another $15,000 that will be coming from the Public Realm Reserve. This is the last of the 3-year pilot that's been going on in 3 neighborhoods. There will also be an evaluation report that comes into council in 2018 on how we proceed in the future for the next term. So when we get to this, we'll have to adopt this report to add these projects.
Questions? It's good, okay.
All right, top of page 14, you have a letter from Public Works, asking that the Budget Committee consider accelerating the road safety plan in 2018 rather than 2019. And so what we understand is acceleration would require the addition of $6.3 million over 3 years, being added to the transportation's capital budget. It's outlined on page 14 in the response. So 2.5 in 18, 2.1 in 19, another 1.7 in 2020. As well, if we do this, it actually would reduce the operating budget side. It would lower some operating costs that have been built into the plan, into our budget, by a total of $600,000 over 3 years, as there wouldn't be some need for some of those operating elements to be costed. So that's a decision that'll be before you. Again, this is an increase in debt as well if we proceed on this basis.
Councillor Kara, look like you have a question.
Well, I may have, but if there's a Works Committee member here, they may already know about this, and I just don't. Maybe I have to go back and read the notes. But i.e. including in-house, the reduction in operating includes a reduction of in-house maintenance of the Watch Your Speed program. People are always asking for the Watch Your Speed program to be expanded. How is it going to be reduced in operating cost?
Through the chair, the anticipation is that it will be done through a contractor, and so it will no longer need to be done through internal staff to put them out.
Oh, okay. So if it's done by contract, are we setting up a contract whereby if council feels the need to expand that program, it can be done through the contract? Or is this going to be a highly prescriptive contract and we have to wait 7 years if we want to expand it?
No, we would be in the process of putting that together with the expansion if the acceleration occurs. So we could have some control over that.
Okay, yep. Excellent. Okay, thank you. That's my only question.
Thank you. Any other committee members? Okay, we'll go to outside. Councillor Davis.
Could you just please explain what's in the briefing note?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is no briefing note. This is
report 1X, whatever it is, somewhere on that long list of links that I'm trying to find.
It's 1-0.
1-0, okay.
Thank you. I think. Oh.
Could you just summarize what's in the briefing, what's in the report? 1-0.
Oh, 1-0 is just the
capital. The report includes a sorry, I don't have the report in front of me, but the report includes additional 44 new units on the Watch Your Speed sign, as Councillor Carroll defined. That was a popular program, and so trying to accelerate that program, yes. Being more responsive to the needs there, and as we update the data to support that program. We also have identified the accelerations that we've done to date on the Vision Zero plan and propose a number of accelerations to other components of that plan, including some capital on the road safety piece, which is actual signs and lines and engineering improvements, as well as signals, as well as the other sort of toolkit, adding more senior safety zones, adding more school safety zones, and some additional components of that.
There were going to be 13 school safety zones. How many school safety zones will there be in this expedited? How much does it cost for a school safety zone?
Here, hold on here.
$62?
School safety zones. Looking, here we go. Okay. Safety audit risks. Sorry, Councillor, I'm looking for the number. Oh, here we go. The current is 5 schools per year. The proposal is to take that up to 20.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
But that, how much is just that, moving the school safety zones up to 20?
I don't know if I have that information. My note doesn't have that broken out, but I can certainly get back to you with that information.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, next.
okay. So we're still on page 14. The next item is BU 40.1P, which is a letter transmitted from Public Works to the Budget Committee, asking that there be consideration given to the multi-use trail Centennial College Progress Campus and Military Trail Road project. So this, I believe, was a member motion asking that we look at a project that would connect the Centennial College Progress Campus and Military Trail Road. We've been advised, this just came through as of November 2017. So this is not a project in the 10-year capital plan, and it requires work to be done between Transportation, Parks, Forestry and Recreation, and TRCA. And they are advising that they will evaluate this as part of the 2018 Cycling Network Plan Review.
Questions? Councilor Carl?
I'm sorry. There's been another change made to the website. I can't get to an agenda. I'm trying to get to the online version of this agenda today. How do I get there? I want to look at 40.10 and I can't get there. But what if I was a member of the public and I thought, what's on the agenda for today? How would I get there? We have no room in this room for the members of the public. But if I were watching at home and I suddenly wanted to go to the hyperlink of this, I can't find it.
We'll look into it, Councillor, and get back to you as quickly as possible. Okay, Josie, next.
Okay. Top of page 15. So the next item that's before you is a report, BU 41W, and it's from the Deputy City Manager of Cluster B and the Acting Chief Financial Officer, entitled Portland's Flood Protection. And essentially, it's just seeking authority, delegated authority to the Deputy City Manager and the
Council, can we, it's a bit noisy, if we can have everybody just stop the conversations so we can hear this? Thank you. Okay.
So this particular report seeks authority to execute a contribution agreement with the federal and provincial governments. As you know, this is a three-government project. It's built into the 10-year capital plan. Each party is contributing $416.7 million, and so this is just seeking authority to do that. And we will need to have that authority as we proceed through to enable us to move forward on this project.
Councillor Mahavik?
Right. This is just a question on process, Josie. So we have these blue sheets now. We should hang on to these blue sheets because as you're giving me information, I'm putting down notes, support, not support. Or will we get a fresh copy of these next week? Because we're going to be asking for more of them.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, we'll be updating these as we go, so you'll get a fresh copy next week of these notes.
Don't make notes on this, or make notes on this, but you're going to have to transfer them to the new ones as we make decisions. For decision making.
Wherever you manage
Yeah,
your
yeah.
items, yeah. But yes, we will be updating it to reflect whatever gets decided or added,
Right.
so that you have those. And those items that you've dealt with, you know, we will not have to revisit.
Right. Thank you.
Okay?
Councillor Davis?
W. This report is dated. This report is dated December 5th. So through you, Mr. Chair, just so everyone is clear, there are reports that get sent to committee that are distributed, as my understanding, with the agenda at the time we have meetings. So if it was an early item, which is dated December 5th, it would have been part of a first circulation. We now have another circulation of reports that are for today. So my understanding that December 5th was a posted item from before, which I can't tell. Yes.
Any questions, more questions? Okay, next, Josie.
Okay, next item is Facilities, Real Estate, Energy, and Environment. It's a report that was at City Council November 7th, 8th, and 9th on the update and next steps of the potential relocation of the Etobicoke Civic Center. Council referred a request for $3.5 million to undertake the study that's required for this project to begin. What we are identifying here is that those funds are included in the 10-year capital plan for facilities, real estate, environment, and energy, and funded.
Any questions? Councillor Nunziata?
Yeah, so the $3 million is just for the study? I thought that we had, there was a study done.
This is to begin. My recollection of the report, and we'll let facilities answer in a moment, but the report that you had before you was to look at some options. There's a preferred option. With that option came the cost to actually start doing the detailed planning and design.
So through the chair, the $3.5 million is to proceed with working with the consultant who was prepared the winning bid for through the design competition, and to further conduct analysis on the relocation of Etobicoke Civic Center.
Okay, but the decision on the relocation is finalized, is it not?
Correct, as went through council, I believe, November 7th, 8th, and 9th. That was accepted.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Josie, next item.
So through you, Mr. Chair, just to be clear, this is part of a stage gating approach project, just much like our other major projects. So this is the first stage, is to do the initial planning and design so we can come back then with an understanding of the full scope and cost. So first stage is to do that work. That's the only thing that's in the 10-year capital plan is the funding to do stage one.
Okay, next item.
Okay, so the next series of items that are in the 10-year, or sorry, in the capital wrap-up notes really relate to transmittals that come from our accountability offices and some of our boards. Just start at bottom of page 15. And it's their transmittals on their requests and or board-approved capital plans. And so I will just quickly go through these and indicate whether it's consistent with what's in the 10-year capital plan or not. So the first one is Office of the Lobbyist Registrar. So she has identified the need for $700,000 in her 10-year capital plan to do state of good repair work on her system. That $700,000 is included in the 10-year capital plan. Next page. Office of the Ombudsman, another $700,000 request for 2023. That too, that's for a case management system. That's just to ensure in the future that there is that it's maintained. So that is included in the 10-year capital plan. Okay, as we now move to...
Any questions on those two? They're already in the capital plan. I think we had that when they did the presentation to us.
Okay.
Okay.
Now we'll move to our agencies for Toronto Police Service. The 10-year capital plan that's been approved by the board is what is before you as a 10-year capital plan, so it is consistent. There are no issues there. Any questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Councillor Fletcher?
Does that include the new station that would be built as part of the consolidation of 54 and 55?
Oh, thank you for that, Councillor. Yes. So I was going to identify that because there is a report coming. So it includes the funding for the consolidation of 54, 55 police division in that.
There are no land acquisition costs, though, associated with that?
I believe the entire value that's been budgeted is to construct. That's correct.
Is how much?
I think the total project cost is $39 million. That's built into the 10-year plan.
39 million.
Hold on, Councillor.
Pardon? I'm sorry.
No, I was asking. Continue.
Okay. And that includes, I guess, is there enough flexibility there, given that the proposed site will be part of a larger city building project?
So
At
through,
what point would that overall funding be looked at?
Right.
TTC, police, heritage, other operations? How would that be put together?
so through you, Mr. Chair, the report that you will be seeing shortly at the next executive committee identifies a planning process for which some site development will occur. We don't know, other than the police site, what specifically will go on that other site. That'll have to come back as part of the 10-year capital budgeting process to understand what other elements might fall in there. They are not funded.
How might we, and I think that approval at least would have to be conditional on a larger site master plan. You're not, I saw your eyes, as my understanding. So how would that be built into this conversation?
So I will, not sure who's here, but Tony Veneciano's here from police, but I think that we have a couple of issues with that particular site. One is ensuring that there is good site development to know what to place on that site, but we also have the police 54-55 division project, which is part of their transformation that we want to make sure moves as a first phase.
Maybe I should ask Mr. That site, and looking at that site, it's been very clear from the beginning that in coming on that site, it would be looking at larger redevelopment of the entire site for that approval. Is that your understanding?
That's correct. It's actually, the site is about 5 acres in size, just under 5 acres. So it does allow for both the TTC, which currently occupies the site, as well as us, and other community programs on the site, including a heritage component, if that's what council decides.
So the 39 million is basically the beginning of an investment by the city. Is that your understanding for this
The
site?
39 million is our cost to actually build
I
a police
understand,
facility.
but there would be a much larger investment required to utilize that site because it's not a standalone site, is it?
That's correct.
Whereas 55 Division currently, if that site was used, that's simply a standalone site that is already owned by the TPS City of Toronto.
True. But then there would be other costs associated with.
But it's standalone. Nothing else would have to happen around
Exactly.
that site. So there's a few of those, but this is a multi-use site. So 39 million would be part of a larger development project. That's my understanding.
That's correct.
I'm not clear that that's your understanding.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to be crystal clear, the 39 million is to fund the one site, the one division on that site. Anything over and above that is additional cost.
That's what's coming to executive.
The lot more costs?
That's what, yeah, so that will be coming to executive,
Okay.
the bigger plan.
Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Yes, the 39 million was for the replacement of 54 Division only. Correct? That's been in the budget for years.
And that is,
55 Division had a capital allocation attached to it in the state of good repair budget somewhere. I'm not familiar with 55's capital, but I assume if we're merging 55 and 54, there will be capital associated with both of those. That's been the pitch, that they will end up being more cost-effective on the operating side, but, and that we would save replacing both of those sites. So where's the 55 Division capital money?
so through you, Mr. Chair, we are going through a modernization now. Certainly 55, there was a renovation that was planned later on in our capital program.
Right.
To actually bring that up to a state of good repair.
And how much is that?
That was, I think, about $8 million. And that's just by memory. There was also monies for a new 54 division, which at the time we estimated to be, and that estimate has changed over time to now about $39 million. Those have all been collapsed into, or at least the ones that don't include 54 and 55, have been collapsed into a facilities realignment optimization project, which goes beyond just 54 and 55 and looks at a number of different facilities. The goal is to shrink our facilities footprint and to provide the same level of service.
You've just raised more questions for me. So if this is collapsed into an overall facilities realignment or whatever you just called it, are you saying that 39 million is going to be used for that purpose?
No, it's strictly for 54, 55. There is another budget line that in our capital that speaks to the actual realignment. of other facilities.
So all I'm trying to get at, there's 8 million, all there is now is there was 8 million in state of good repair for 55, and 54 division had 39. So in total, there was 47 million that would have been budgeted had these gone ahead as separate facilities. And so I'm assuming that it would all be included.
So while he's looking for numbers, I'll just start. Just to understand the transformation program of work, what the police board is doing is reviewing all their boundaries, and all the plans that were, all the stations that were planned for renovation or replacement was all collapsed into one line until they understood what all those boundaries are. 2 years ago, when we had separate projects for 54 and 55, those were merged into one, and so was the money. So there isn't a project in this capital plan today that says 8 million for 55 and so much for 54. They have already been collapsed based on the direction of the board, and the sum of the two to build a site is $39 million.
Well,
And
that's brand new information, and we've been meeting, and that's a surprise. So, but what I'm wondering is, when are the boundaries going to be known? When will we know the
That's the
boundaries
last
of 54 and 55 merged?
Those are preliminary boundaries have actually been established, and they should be known within the next couple of months or so.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other questions on this item? Okay, we'll move to the next. Oh,
Can I
Councillor
just to add a police board lens to this, the practice of having supervision over 2 divisions at a time in the operating budget has already begun. There's a layer of supervision beginning to take that approach, is there not?
Yes, they're actually operating as a district right now, 54 and 55.
Right, and so their experience in doing that is going to inform what will eventually be the final boundaries in all of the cases where we have someone supervising 2 divisions.
Boundaries will change right across the city.
Right, but all of the superintendents overseeing 2 divisions at a time are a big part of informing the final decisions on boundaries.
That's correct.
Right, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, next item.
Okay, so page 16, we're dealing with the transmittal from the Board of Health on the Toronto Public Health's 10-year capital plan. So it is substantially consistent with what you have in the 10-year preliminary capital plan before you. The adjustments there's 2 sets of adjustments that make it different. One is some of the technology projects that had been through a citywide review of priorities have been amended, both in terms of timing and in our ability to proceed based on readiness. And we've also adjusted for some carry forward funding that we've added to the 10-year capital plan and the budget for 18 based on where they are in their completion of that project. But substantively similar based on the recommendations, and the MOH is here if you have questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to them.
Okay, page 18, I believe that's our last one on capital. So this is a transmittal from the TTC Commission recommending their 10-year capital plan of almost $3 billion. That is both for their conventional program of almost $6.3 billion, as well as the final costs associated with the Spadina subway extension that is now open. So there's $160 million to complete that, and then some additional funding to continue the planning on the Scarborough. So in total, it's $10.252 billion, and that is what you have before you in the 10-year or the preliminary 10-year capital plan. So that is 1S. And then, so what has been funded on both sides is the same. On page 19, there are 2 other recommendations asking that we work, the Chief Financial Officer and City Manager, work with the TTC on some funding strategies to deal with their $2.7 billion below the line that we were not able to fund. And finally, some authority to procure and continue with bicycle parking at 9 TTC stations, for which funding is included.
Any questions? Councillor Campbell.
Sure. It's just, it's on the 160 million in the capital plan for the TYSSE. What's that 160 million? What is that 160 million? Is that for the settlement of claims, or is that, it's all claims?
For you, Mr. Chair, it's all claims and closeouts. Yeah.
All claims and closeouts.
Closeout costs.
Okay. Okay. And in the, seeing as you're there, in the preliminary capital budget, that's 6.2 billion. Can you sort of roughly break that out between sort of infrastructure and transportation vehicles? Do you have that kind of can you make that sort of an estimate between subway cars, street cars, buses, and then capital improvements?
Through the chair, so I'll look through and try to get that breakout. Essentially, in terms of the categories of capital expenditures, 82% of it is SOGR, which does include some vehicles itself. Another 3% would be service improvements, 5% for growth, and 10% for legislated projects. I'll scan through the notes and see if I can give you some quantities in terms of the actual fleets versus, you know, non-fleet type requirements.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Okay. I think we're on to operating now. So those are the green sheets. Okay, Councillor Davis, I'm sorry. Sure.
So one of the issues, I wanted to ask about Wheel-Trans capital. And one of the things that the Accessibility Committee is concerned about is moving towards this new model of families of service and making sure that stations are accessible. So I wondered, what have we got in the capital budget for accessibility?
So within the 10-year capital plan, roughly 650 million or so is for legislative projects, and those are predominantly made up of our Easier Access program.
Yes.
I'll look through
We've
and I'll
got
see what
31 more stations to go. So how many stations will be made accessible this year?
Two. Through the chair, the target is 2 more stations in 2018.
Okay, so what percentage of stations now are accessible? Half?
So unfortunately, I don't have that detail in front of me. I'll get that to you right away.
About half. There's 37 accessible and
A little over half.
31 not, or something like that. So oh yeah, these are not the program people. So the plan is between now, we'll be converting a couple per year?
It really just depends on the nature.
What's in the 10-year capital plan for accessibility, easier access in the 10-year plan? How many stations?
Well, so all of the stations have to be fully AOTA compliant within the 10-year plan. So we have just under 500 million in the plan dedicated to easier access. The only 2 stations that are not in the plan as of yet is, I believe, Islington and Warden, and that's based on initial or further reviews that are being done to determine exactly how those stations can be made accessible.
So if we're only doing 2 in 18,
2 will be completed.
we still have 31 to go.
Yeah, 2 will be completed. It's not that other ones aren't being worked on, it's just 2 are aimed to be completed in 2018.
So I can are they equally distributed over the next 10 years?
No.
They're back-end loaded? So that's what I mean. At 2020, then there's a whole bunch in those 5 years?
You can see the amounts. In Appendix A, I don't know if you have our budget report, capital budget report, but in Appendix A under building and,
I have now the link to
Anyways, go ahead.
a letter. No, you know what, I don't.
So, but through the chair, in terms of our funding, in order to complete the stations, the funding is essentially ranging from 50 to 70 million a year over the next, up until 2024, 2025. So it is evenly distributed with the work to be completed on time within the requirement.
Okay, so those 31 stations, if we took a number and divided it, the money's evenly divided? So the stations are going to come on evenly between now and?
2025.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's not what Joe.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, so now we're now on the green sheets.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to draw your attention to, I think, a critical piece of information so people understand kind of where we are on this budget. Page 2 and page 3 of the green sheets has a summary of financial implications of everything for which there is a financial impact associated with either a referral or report, as well as anything coming out of briefing notes that have been requested. But what I really would like you to focus on is at the very top, so that we're really crystal clear around the financial status of the operating budget. So when we launched the budget, as you know, we had the base budget, which was fully funded, and what was available was an additional $3.4 million as a result of the additional moving to the 2.1% at inflation. So what we had said to everyone was that the base budget was fully funded and there was an additional $3.4 million. We also said to folks that built into the operating budget in the non-program expenditure budget was the vacancy rebate savings, for which councils directed that half of it be used towards poverty reduction, as well as any retail relief programs. And because of some of the delay, what we had available in the base, we've held it as an expenditure until you decide what you want to do. So it's a holding play, a placeholder of $5.5 million. So as we entered this process, we said that the base was covered and you had up $8.9 million to put towards any new enhanced investments. We are now in a situation where the 5.5 is still in the base as an offset. The 3.4, based on our latest assessment information, has turned that into our rates that generates actually 3.7 million. And the assessment growth estimate that we had built into the budget when we launched the budget was 55 million. We received the final roll. It's now been updated, and there is an additional 13.3 million in assessment for 2018. So that's the 13.290. So those first three lines, 5.5 net, 3725.2, and 13.290, total 22.516 million. So as you deliberate on the new enhanced investments that you are considering, and any other financial implications on the operating budget that are in this list, there is $22.5 million available for investments, to support investments. What you see in the next line is 41,290.6. That's the sum of the list of new and enhanced that you have that are before you for consideration. And then what we've identified here are the additional values associated with other items that have been identified through briefing notes and reports that have been referred for consideration, or for which staff have identified an implication to based on the request that's come forward. So coming from referrals and reports, that's net 120,000 for 2018 with some additional savings. That's the Vision Zero acceleration on page 3. That actually sums up to 7.5 million, and those are all things identified in briefing notes based on your requests, if you chose to move forward on any of those. Okay? So that's where we're starting from as we deal with the operating budget.
So is that clear with everyone? Okay. Almost. Councillor Davis.
This list, financial impact of referrals and reports for consideration. These are the only additional referrals that have cost implications.
So we go through this?
Okay.
Yes, but this ties...
In addition to the 41 million of
Correct.
not included. Okay.
So that's page, and then on page 3, briefing notes that identify other things.
So this assumes the 55 million in revenue that were offsets on that table of not included in the budget. So you, because you've only got 41.29 net. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
No, so that's 40...
It's 41.3 net, but there's 53.8446 in revenue in the not included in the budget line of new and enhanced.
So new and enhanced has a total value of 95 million.
Why it was ever in that column outside the budget, I don't know.
Yes. So that's all the, essentially it's all the childcare growth strategy all bundled up together. That's what that is. That's why it's, the things that are in that list, some of them have revenues associated with them.
Absolutely.
So 95 million in expenditures of total cost that would cost the city on a tax basis 42 million. And then you add this list of other items that have so far been identified.
Okay.
Okay? All right.
Sorry. So we're looking at these items and we're going to receive this as a report. But when do we go back to the things highlighted in the 41 million before adding these monies? Is that, where is that, is that in today's process or?
So today's process is to go through all these briefing notes and reports that have that identify all these net new things. You have, as part of December's round of meetings, gone program by program to understand the base and the new and enhanced.
Right, but in approving the reports of this now collated list, we're not suggesting adopt all of these before going back to the things highlighted in the 41.
No, today is about understanding these things. There are no, you will not be making decisions on this. This is just about understanding.
Yeah. By final wrap up, we'll
Correct.
have done the, horse trading. Okay.
Councillor Davis, one more.
It's in the form of a report, but there was the retail development initiative that was going to come out of the, what is annually 22 million, but half is going, I know we're dealing with a quarter of a year. Where is that retail?
It's not in this list. It's in the 41 million. It's in the new. That's what I just asked.
Is it, it's in the list of 41 million?
In the list of 41 million.
Yeah.
Which still has to be determined.
Right.
On what we're funding and not funding.
Yeah.
So
It's not in the budget.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the
I knew that, actually.
poverty reduction and the retail elements are in the 41 million.
Yeah.
For which you can use the 5.5 towards.
Okay, so why don't we begin with going through the reports?
Okay, so we're going to start on page 24. What's in between what we just saw and is just really all the requests that you adopted. It's just a record of your actions for requests. So operatively, we're starting on page 24, which takes us back to briefing notes that were circulated very early in the process, for which I think we've had some questions about, so I will assume to go a little bit more quickly on these before we get to the new. So the briefing note number 2, which was distributed back in December, which was just identifying all the inflationary increase estimates, calculations that we use both for building the budget as well as the basis for calculating user fees on a program-specific basis, and so that's just really there for your information. If there are no questions, I'll move to the next one, which is on gapping levels.
Councillor.
I have been trying to get at what are the inflation costs of contracts, so that we better understand. We understand the inflation costs of wage increases. We understand the inflation costs of goods and services that are contained, and you've got some fancy formula now that every division is different to create the inflationary factor within divisions. But how much are our contracted out services costing us in inflation? Is there a way to capture that and I think we asked for a briefing note on that last year.
Through Mr. Chair, I would think that they would be as well program specific, because we could define if you're talking about contracted services versus other kinds of contracts on salt, so we'd just have to be really crystal clear what your focus is, if it's around professional services, because it will be dependent on when you procure and how many people procure. Not goods,
Just services. And those things that are contracted in multi-year contracts. Sometimes we have 7-year contracts with inflation built into them. I know recently they've had COLA as the factor for increasing the annualized costs of those contracts, but some of them did not. They had fixed percentage increases, and I don't know how we capture. Generally, are we paying more in particularly human service costs than we are had we done it differently?
So, for example, and I think there's a briefing note here from Engineering Services that's talking about whether we're dealing with it in-house or whether we're contracting services is an example that.
Yeah, so all of the basement flooding work now, we've contracted out the program management, we've contracted out all the project supervision, we have layered on another whole layer of contract management, and I have no idea whether that's a good use of our resources or whether we just should have hired a bunch more project managers. There's no way to know which is a better approach.
So I would, through Mr. Chair, suggest this, if we could discuss this maybe during the lunch break, and we could figure out a way to see what we could bring together for you as a briefing note.
Because I know in the absence of having sufficient staffing in many areas, we are contracting things out. Yesterday, we've contracted out the golf course review. We're contracting out, studies all over the place now. We never used to. We're like, I have no idea whether this growth in how much we've grown in consulting, although I'm sure there's a consulting report somewhere, there usually is, and whether it would be more efficient to do it internally.
So through the chair, there's an excellent briefing note that's been developed by Engineering and Construction Services. It's in the agenda.
What's the number?
I'll look for it. I just read it last night, late last night. But it provides you with an assessment of the cost of contracting out services versus retaining the internal capacity to develop those services.
I will look.
And so it gives a good benchmark on the implications of contracting out.
We'll try to get that for you, Councillor. Okay, next item. Oh, sorry, Councillor, you're right, Councillor Campbell.
Sorry, where do I find briefing note number 2? It's not in the supplementary package?
They would have been distributed back in December.
Oh, these are, okay.
These are all, what you have in this package are all the net new items.
Okay, so the economic factors, gapping levels, changing to,
They would be posted if yes.
Would they not be on
Okay.
the city budget 2018 page?
Should be, yes.
Because when you go to the briefing notes section of the Toronto City Budget 2018 page, I'm insane. I'm trying to go paperless here. If I go looking for briefing note number 2 on the website under Toronto City Budget 2018, what I find is briefing note number 2 which is an operating briefing note on economic factors. So are there overlapping and duplicated number systems?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, there is not. That's the one we were just dealing with. Which
So on the website, that's not what it is. If I click on briefing note number 2, BN number sign 2, I get operating briefing note on economic factors.
that's the one we were on,
That's what
Council.
we're on right now.
But here, it says briefing note number 2, November 10, basement flooding protection program. So have we got multiple number systems that are a duplication? You're asking basement flooding questions because that's what briefing note number 2 seems to pertain to on the table of contents of the things circulated to me this morning. And on the website, it's something else.
So that's all capital.
And the
You
thing
turn
noticed here doesn't seem to be.
Councillor, that,
That's the capital table of contents. If you,
So have we made started in capital, there's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 number system, and in operating, there's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 number system, and in rate supported, there's another number system that is also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Is that my challenge this morning?
No.
Because if it is, I can meet that challenge. I just want to know if that is the case.
no. Through you, Mr. Chair, I will go back to this package, and you will see that on the page that you're just referring to, we had rate-supported capital that started with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we started tax-supported with 6 and 7. So they're unique numbers.
Then perhaps you could tell me why on the website, if I click on briefing note number 2, I do not get this briefing note.
But on the operating, we have also numbered them 1, 2, whatever.
That's what I'm asking.
So this is operating.
So there are overlapping number systems, and I just have to, okay.
So capital is a set of numbers.
Yeah,
I'm trying my best, honestly.
yeah,
it's
we're not.
confusing.
So you have listed briefing notes 1 through X on operating and briefing note numbers 1 through X on capital. We are now on operating, briefing note number 2, economic factors. Okay. And if you follow along with the table of contents past the capital set of notes, you will see that table of contents.
Okay, next, so we're going on now to the next item, which is BU 40.1, briefing note number 3.
So this too was distributed early on, December 12th, from our last round of meetings, briefing note number 3, operating. We're on page 24, Councillor. And this was the 2018 gapping levels across the entire organization. And what it's showing in comparison to 2017, that the average gapping rate is actually decreased to 1.3, so just marginally, compared to 1.4 in 2017.
Today, actually.
Questions?
Something on gapping levels in here just now.
Councillor Davis.
What is the vacancy rate that is not the gapping rate? No, at the same time, I'm reading the briefing note about why we have no staff doing ECS work, because we can't get them at certain rates. And now I'm trying, vacancy on top, if you go through the city's directory and you look at all the names, vacant, acting, vacant, vacant, acting, it is astounding how many positions in the current structure are vacant. So what's the percentage of vacancies?
So the briefing notes on the website have no correspondence.
So through you, Mr. Chair, as you can appreciate, the level of vacancies is a fluid number. It's a dynamic number because there is a lot of turnover, and I think as staff have been saying, the attrition rates are increasing as retirements increase.
Yes.
There is a briefing note we'll come to shortly from our colleagues in HR that's outlining the actual number of staff. To get the vacancy rate at a point in time would be a request that we would have to go back out into the organization so that we can actually capture that for you.
Isn't that something you can do on your new fancy
yes.
Data system?
Yes, we can. We need to just pick a point in time at which to show that vacancy rate. We just
Today.
we'll pick a date.
Today. Okay, so there's another briefing. Okay. Thank you. What's that briefing note number? I'd like to read it.
The one from HR is number 14. We'll be coming to that one shortly.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on briefing note number 3?
Well, I haven't actually seen it, so I might have some at final wrap-up.
Okay. Okay, next item.
Okay, so briefing note number 4, which also was distributed back on December 12th, summarizes all the changes in user fees that are in the 2008 preliminary operating budget. This would have been supplemental to what was being posted and given notice on at the time that we started the budget process back in December. But as a summary, the fee changes that we are seeing in this round are summarized on page 25. So there are fees that are approved automatically with an inflationary increase. For this year, they generate about $4.3 million. Others that have been adjusted for market rate comparisons generates about $500,000. And then we have some new fees that in total are generating just about $900,000. And they are in court services, economic development, MLS, and Office of the Treasurer.
Questions? Committee members? Seeing none. Councillor Davis.
So I see that this 5.7 million is incremental over 2017. What has been the incremental or the total increased revenue generated over some period of time? You can tell me.
Yes.
5 years, 10 years, and what percentage of the budget do user fees now represent?
So through you, Mr. Chair, don't have it at the top of my head, but really since the policy was implemented, which would have been in 2011 for the 2012
Yes.
budget process.
Yep.
We have a couple of sizable things because we went to full cost recovery and adjusted it twice for our development fees. But in total, it was over 113 million that we've generated as a result of this policy.
And
using this policy as the basis.
Okay, and 113 million is before 2018?
That would be from 2012, including
2018.
I believe so, but I'll check the numbers.
Okay, so around, and do you have any idea what percentage of the operating budget it constitutes?
It's 8%, but that would also include, of course, our fares from the TTC. No? Sorry.
Okay, 8% without
Excluding.
fares, and
Without
where was
fares.
it in 2012?
I would have to get that, and I don't have that at the top.
Okay. The other thing that's always raised with this by Councillor Shiner, and I'll be Councillor Shiner today, we raise our fees based on certain service levels. How do we make sure that we are delivering the service levels that those user fees are supposed to deliver? For instance, as you point out, the planning fees went up hugely. A portion of those went to buildings, a portion of those, they were distributed across all of the divisions that had development roles. How do we know that the services those user fees were supposed to fund are being funded at the correct service level? Are being delivered at the service level, when in fact we have all these vacancies?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I think that every division will have some challenge around attrition and turnover, but where we have seen volumes increase, including in this budget, we have added, the revenues to bring in additional staff. So we have a volume increase actually in the planning budget for Committee of Adjustment built into this budget to deal with the increased demand, and we've been able to use that revenue to supplement where there has been a need to deal with demand so that they are dealing with the service line.
Because that's the question I think I've asked at every budget meeting. Where are we and how are we accommodating growth and demand? And I don't think I see it in terms of additional staff to deal with demand. The growth strategies, I understand. We're developing strategies that are clear. We're going to expand and grow certain services. But in other areas where there isn't clear demand or growth identified, like building permits and so on, where would we find the growth in demand in budgets?
So through you, Mr. Chair, we treat it as usually as a base budget change, a volume change. So you would see in various budgets where we have adjusted and added staff and or funding to deal with volume. So whether that in the past has been in the area of OW, where we've had caseload increase, right? Or where in this year, the City Committee of Adjustment volume increase. We've built that into the base. So it just really depends on the particular area. Now, if it's adding a service or enhancing a service level, then you see that as a new request funded from the associated revenue.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Okay, next item.
Okay, the next item is briefing note number 5. This is the annual compilation of all the contributions to and withdrawals from all the reserve and reserve funds. So what we essentially do, every set of budget notes has at the back an appendix that itemizes all the planned draws and or contributions where we know it. And then this briefing note, both on operating and capital, and this briefing note rises it up across the city so that that people have this information. And this has been asked for in the past, so it's really just information around that. And it's been revised. It was issued and then revised for one adjustment that we made based on new information. So this is annually. So on page 26, you can see as a summary what the balances will be on the operating side as a result of the budget. And so we have program specific and of course corporate reserve funds, and the briefing note goes into a lot more detail about what those things are.
Questions? Councillor Davis.
Sorry. There was supposed to be a report, and I asked about it at council, and I think that report is still on the council agenda, but the reserve account report, is that correct? It's still as a carryover for this month?
Yes, and it will be before council at its next meeting.
Okay, because I'm trying to figure out how to deal with this issue. There was initially, we have just spent all of the capital for potential acquisition of school board properties, fields, etc. I don't know what that was exactly called. It was called the school acquisitions, whatever. And there was supposed to be a report on how to replenish that reserve, which was about $12 million when it started. When are we going to deal with replenishing that reserve? In this budget process or at council? Or can I deal with it at council?
Certainly, through the chair. It's our full intention to report out on this. It's not necessarily required that we deal with it as part of the budget process. It can be reported out on its own. As you know, Councillor, the province has put a moratorium on school sales. And so the issue is not urgent in the sense that we can afford to report out within a month or two on the funding options that are available to us.
Okay, so I could move that report request at council.
Yes, and we will, in accordance with that motion, report out within a quarter or so.
Okay. The other thing that surprised me was that $360,000 for the ARC programs, which was funded through the National Child Benefit Reserve, is still being drawn from the National Child Benefit Reserve, and I thought we were going to permanently put it into the operating base. And I thought we had achieved that last year in the budget.
Sorry, Councillor, through you, Mr. Chair, there is a portion of the ART program funded through Children's Services that was indeed added to the base, but there is still resources required from the reserve fund to fund the full scope of the program.
To me, that is just, we've got to resolve that. It's an ongoing cost, and it's got to be put in the base budget. So I guess I'm wondering why it didn't get put in the base budget.
I missed that one.
I'm just wondering why it didn't get put into the base budget, because I thought we had done that last year.
The full transfer into the base budget did not happen. The Children's Services budget only funds 10 art programs. The remainder are funded through the reserve and through Parks, Forestry, and Recreation.
But it's an ongoing program that needs
It is an ongoing
sustainable
program,
funds.
so ultimately that will be a fiscal pressure.
So we're going to, if I did a briefing note asking you how we could accommodate this on an ongoing basis in the budget, you could come back with some suggestions about how we do that.
Yes, it would have to be a briefing note from Children's Services, Parks, Forestry, and Recreation, and Toronto Employment and Social Services.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next item.
All right, so we're at the bottom of page 26. It's briefing note number 6. It too was distributed December 12th, and it is the culmination of the equity impact review briefing note. As you know, this is the second year in which the city is putting an equity lens on all of the potential recommended adjustments to the budget, both in terms of what might be changing in terms of existing services in the base budget, revenue changes, as well as any of the new and enhanced items that have been in the list before committee since the launch.
Questions? Seeing none, next item.
Through you, Mr. Chair, page 27, briefing note number 9. This was before you as well and was slightly revised. I think it's been reissued. It's the Toronto Poverty Reduction Strategy. It's before you, and it identifies the work plan for 2018, that it includes 55 initiatives that would be implemented both with existing resources as well and external funding, and 20 initiatives that have a combined impact of 63.6 million gross, 13.7 million net, and they are all on the list as part of the 41 million in front of you for consideration.
Questions, Councillor Mihevc.
I had asked for a report with some numbers on, or perhaps as part of this, on community benefits, advancing that work. Is that still to come? I don't.
Through the chair, yes.
Sorry?
Through the chair, yes.
Okay, so it'll be available by the 23rd?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
In the green sheets, it comes up later.
Is the report there in the green sheets later on? Is that what you're suggesting?
On page 9, sorry, page 8 of the green sheets, the motion requesting the briefing note is there. We will be bringing it forward.
It will be coming forward.
Yeah, the next two briefing notes, bottom of page 8, top of page 9, will come forward at final wrap-up.
So those are two briefing notes that did not make this package, so you'll have it at your final meeting, Councillor.
Next item.
You can ask questions on briefing note number 9.
Councillor Davis.
I won't ask any on briefing note number 9 if there's another more detailed report to come. That's.
The more detailed report will be on community benefits agreements, and then there's going to be one on CPIP grants and how they're going to manage Bill 148, minimum, especially in particular the minimum wage piece for our community partners.
Okay.
If you have questions on other things, that's different, but those two pieces will be coming later.
Okay.
Not that I'm staff.
I guess my basic question on this one, if I could then, on the poverty reduction strategy, There are elements in here where there are net zero costs. And I really do not understand why the net zero programs were not put in the budget. It feels like there's some kind of game being played here. Why have we not put, I'm sorry, I don't mean it to be, it's so difficult to understand. So why there was a whole list of things not included, many of which were net zero costs, but were not included.
So through you, Mr. Chair.
In this strategy.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I believed that keeping it all together so that it wasn't partly in and partly out would actually be less confusing. And so keeping in its entirety the childcare growth costs, whether it's funded from the province or whether the piece is funded from the city as one package, would be clearer and more transparent to everybody by having it in one place. And because there's a piece of it that requires consideration about the funding source, it's all in new. And it is an expansion, right? And so poverty reduction is also, in many cases, a change in service level. That is the determining factor of why something is in new, regardless of the funding source. That, too, is in there as a package.
You know what? I'm not going to talk about what, again, which things were in and which were out, depending on what council approved. But so I won't go there. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item.
So the next is a briefing note from the acting CFO. It's entitled, it's number 11. That too is new. So now we're starting with all new briefing notes. On the city's credit rating performance, I believe that as we launched the budget, we had been asked to report around the city's credit rating and what impacts our ability to borrow and the cost of borrowing. And I'll leave this to the acting CFO to discuss.
Are there any questions? Councillor Campbell.
It's a briefing note 11.
Page 27.
Page 27 of the group.
So we have City of Toronto has a AA rating. Is that what and it's had a AA rating since 2002?
So yes, we are currently rated by 3 credit rating agencies. Moody's has us 1 notch below AAA, AA+. Dominion Bond Rating Services and S&P have us rated at AA stable, which is effectively 2 notches below AAA.
So what are they looking for to get a AAA rating, and what governments receive a AAA rating? Does the Government of Canada have a AAA rating?
The Government of Canada has a AAA rating. The province does not. The province of Ontario, for example, has a AA negative.
Well, that's not a surprise.
So there are a number of credit fundamentals that rating agencies look at. They look at liquidity, that is the amount of reserves that we have. They look at the debt per capita of an issuing entity.
Okay, so if how much does it cost the city for not having a AAA rating? Is that a calculation?
So that's, it's difficult to quantify that, but we could look at our peers, for example. The region of Peel has a AAA rating, and if you look at the cost of their debt relative to the City of Toronto, it's roughly about 5 basis points.
Okay.
So the differential is not that significant.
Okay. All right. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, next briefing note.
Okay, through Mr. Chair, we're now at the top of page 29, still dealing with corporate-wide issues. Briefing note number 12. Again, at the launch, we were asked to bring back detailing how much is in this budget on efficiency savings. And so what we have before you is a briefing note that highlights the impact on the 18 budget in terms of the savings built into this particular budget. You can see the table on page 29 there as a summary in the briefing note as well, that in 2017 we had efficiency savings of 23 million. What's built into 18 is the incremental savings arising from their implementation in 2018. So that's 2 million in the base, as well as an additional 21 million in new efficiency saving costs or savings of 21 million, so another 23 million this year, coincidentally. With those efficiency savings, we'll see incremental savings in 2019 of another 6 million at the end of their implementation. So the briefing note identifies what those items are built into the budget on page 2 and 3 with more details at the back, which coincide with the table that is part of the tables you received at launch.
Questions, Councillor Nunziata?
Yeah, so Josie, is this the motion that I asked for?
Yes, Councillor, that you had asked for this at launch.
To be for each department, and the recommendations that came forth from the Auditor General audit reflected in their budget. Was that?
Yeah. So through Mr. Chair, what you asked for was what we could do was identify what are the efficiencies that are built into the budget. And I think the discussion at our last meeting was that going forward for next year, we would identify, like this list, which ones are as a result of AG recommendations. I believe there is one here, or some of it, and I'd have to ask the TTC to elaborate, but some of the contract management work and review that happened in TTC has resulted in some savings being reflected in this budget. I don't know, Stephen, if it's all of it or some of it, but there would be one here on this list that's coming from that review that I'm aware of, nothing else.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, next item. Oh, Councillor Davis.
So the efficiency savings identified for children's services was the rent in schools?
No, through you, Mr. Chair, the efficiency savings in children's services was really through our increased automation of various services. So a reduction in printing and paper production, which we were able to generate through putting more services online for parents and operators. It totaled about $1 million.
Okay. It says vacancy and attrition opportunities were also efficiencies. Are we really using vacancy and attrition as efficiencies?
Our efficiencies, as I said...
No, not specific to you. Sorry, Elaine.
Where are you looking?
Just on the main page, it says that, you know, are directed to explore for efficiencies and vacancy and attrition opportunities. We're using vacancy and attrition as efficiencies?
So through you, Mr. Chair, the budget directions that were at council when we set the target had identified certain strategies to look at as part of, you know, looking for efficiencies. And so when there are vacant positions and or positions becoming vacant through attrition, it gives staff an ability to then look at how something might be organized, whether it's a change to a process or how workload is distributed, and from that identify efficiencies.
So just reducing staff is considered, and reassigning work?
Well,
basically, or okay, that's fine.
Thank you. Next item.
Okay, so I'm just going to, because we seem to be developed a bit of a jive here, the next new briefing note that you have is number 14, although number 13 was distributed. So I'm just going to stay on this one. Page 29. So there was a request for the city manager to provide a briefing note on the number of temporary and permanent part-time and full-time staff by division, and provide some commentary on how to renew the public service given current and future retirements. So you have that briefing note in front of you. It's number 14. It would have been a part of the package that was just distributed.
Councilor Mihevc, question.
Yes, those are pretty big numbers around the number of folks that we have as temporary and part-time. I guess, is this the human resources?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I'm just wondering, trends. Has this been the part-timization and the temporaryization, if that's a word, of staff? What would be a 5-year trend?
Through the chair, we don't have the 5-year trend here, but I could tell you that certainly for the part-time, it's reflective of operational need in particular divisions. So of course, the bulk of those positions are the rec workers, but then it focuses on those divisions that have historically, traditionally had an operational need for part-time, whether it's shelters or children's services or security guards. So it's not, I don't believe we would see an increased trend for part-time. The numbers on the temporary side reflect a combination, and remember these are employees, so number of employees. So we would have temporary employees based on project-related work, short-term defined projects that are created, as well as capital funding projects, as well as temporary employees to replace permanent employees who are on a variety of leaves, mat leave, sick leave, LTD. So again, I don't have the trend data, but I don't know that we would see dramatic differences in a 5-year period.
How much of the part-time and temporary would be a function of a department head perhaps, or a director or whatever, looking to basically save money? So rather than hire someone on a full-time basis with benefits and so on, you hire 2 part-timers on short-term contracts?
I don't want to speak generically because, you know, every business is different, but my sense would be that the number of part-time positions are created based on an operational need. So we created part-time positions for 311 operation, or there's a deliberate decision to have part-time positions to cover off before and after school childcare.
Okay, yeah.
Operational, not to see. And on
that's fair. That part is fair. I get that.
On the temporary side, the benefits, there are not substantive, there aren't savings and differences in benefits entitlement, for example, for the most part, between temp and perm. So again, it's more the need, the particular operational need that will drive whether or not we're filling a position with a temporary employee or a permanent.
Okay, so a human resource request, a new job would come, sooner or later comes to you, right, to help to fill it. Do you have a box that you tick that says, okay, is this really a full-time position, and you're trying to call it game the system to save on the budget side? Wanting to, as a good employer, I think we want to create full-time positions so people can both do good work, but also don't have to string together 3 part-time jobs to make a living.
So I would say that for divisions filling positions temporarily, it is a deliberate, thoughtful position. Divisions don't want to fill temporarily where they have a permanent need. It costs more money in the long run. It's disruptive to the organization. So I think that it is not a cost-saving strategy. Temporary are being filled to fulfill a specific need, either a temporary project or a backfill of a position that is owned by a permanent employee.
Okay, so you don't see, your honest evaluation is that you don't see this as an area where we are, I don't know, that should be of concern to us who want to have good full-time, fair, be a good full-time, fair employer.
Your last question.
I do not see that as an abuse of how the temporary positions are being used. Councillor Davis.
Political question, I think. But I agree that this is the first time I've seen this. This was my briefing note request, and I am really shocked at the number of temporary employees here. So why would there be in solid waste, for instance, almost 300 temporary employees? Or what about paramedics? Why do we have 429 temporary paramedics?
Councillor, I'm not going to be able to provide you specifics.
Could I get this digitally so that I could convert these into percentages? Because I think you need to analyze this. There are certain departments that are male-dominated that will not have the same kind of vacancy rate as those where the female go on leaves, although there are parental leaves. Obviously, men go on now, so it's probably evened out more. but there are just, the number of temporary employees is really surprising to me. Why would, somebody was about to answer.
Through the chair, on the paramedic side, it's part of our staffing model, so we can't only have full-time paramedics. In order to meet demand during peak periods, we have a pool of part-time paramedics. So that's actually...
No, that's not the question, Juliana. It says there are 35 part-time, but there are 429 temps. Why do we have 429 temporary paramedics? Is anyone here from EMS? The entire room is full. Maybe Mr. Raftis. Oh, no, that's fire. You can do everything, can't you, Paul?
Through the chair, it's a process of converting from temporary to full-time. So it's the characterization is actually not that accurate for, we have part-time paramedics, but that temporary component does not represent that. So we'd have to look at
This says you have 400, out of 1,100 jobs, you have 429 who are temps, and you have 35 that are part-time.
Councillor, just to clarify, it doesn't say 1,100 jobs. It says there are 1,100...
1,650 jobs. Sorry, I got it wrong.
People, employees.
1,650 employees, and 429 of them are temporary. This is just one example. And 35 are part-time. I know we moved to this part-time, I don't know why I'm looking at you, Mr. Raftis, but you moved to the part-time model, but there's 429 here identified as temps. Sorry?
We can go back and review any division in particular that you want more information on.
I presume, okay.
So,
if you can send this...
Through the chair, if I might add, I think you should look at that specific number. It probably is a function of the process of hiring those paramedics. It looks quite high to me as well. I think quite a number of those would be in the part-time category. So we'll go back and have a look at that number.
Okay. All right, I will send, there's some in here, like bargaining unit in solid waste. You don't have a lot of temps in solid waste. There should not be a lot of temps in solid waste. I mean, they get hired, they're on rates. So I will, yeah. Could I have the digital version of this table so that I can play with it? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher's next.
Just a very quick question. Around the accountability offices and then the CFO's office, and I was under the impression, and it may be shown here in these numbers, that we were going to be shifting some of the staff responsibilities from the Auditor General into a more internal audit function within your division, I believe, Mr. CFO. Is that reflected here in these numbers?
So the internal audit division actually is within the city manager's area.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is it here? Where is it there then? I don't see it listed. Oh, internal audit. Okay, 9 to 11. Is that, and how many of those are new, or how many of those have been buttressed from the Auditor General's staff?
So through you, Mr. Chair.
Weighted, if you know what I mean, percentage.
So the Auditor General's office, completely separate function from internal audit under city manager. There has been no adjustment, reorganization, rationalization between the two functions. So
how long has that internal office been with 11 employees?
There was an addition, I believe, last year. The council actually added 2 positions, but this function has been an ongoing function since amalgamation.
Was there not an understanding that we needed to weight this more on the internal audit side rather than waiting for everything to go wrong and then find out what's gone wrong? And how is that reflected here?
I believe that was a discussion at council about the need for more proactive, preventative approach.
But there was no
There is no new request to add to this complement. There were 2 positions added last year, but not for 2018 budget process.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, we'll go on to the next briefing note.
Okay, now really to confuse everyone. So we're on page 30 and of the green. It's briefing note number 13. I just went in this order so not to confuse you more. But annually, we provide a corporate review of all the position changes reflected in the budget. So I want to be really clear that the briefing note you just dealt with was actually head count, the number of people that are here at the city and their classification. What this briefing note talks about is the number of approved positions in the complement. So the establishment or complement is this briefing note, and the changes reflected as a result of this budget, which is different than the strength or the bums in seats, so to speak, count that you just dealt with in the previous briefing note. So one's about the planned positions, the other's about the actual bodies that are in those positions. So what this briefing note highlights, which we did describe at the launch, briefing note 13. So what this briefing note does describe, as we did at the launch, the changes in approved positions. And so what we highlight for you are those positions that are associated with delivering service, or what we call our operating positions. It's page 2 of the briefing note. And then we identify those that are permanent and those that are temporary. And then we have capital positions that are for project delivery, and they are permanent or temporary. So that's the dynamic of the kinds of the characteristics of the complement. So as you can see, at the highest level, in total permanent positions, there's a change of 181.5 in the operating going down. We're adding 181.5 in capital. And then on the temporary, we're actually adding 68.9. The table below that, table 2, identifies the drivers as to why those changes are happening. And you can see that in our base budget, there are adjustments as it relates to prior year implications, completed capital projects, other kinds of changes in the base, volume, etc. That's going down. We have capital positions going up as a result of delivering new capital projects and new and enhanced. Overall, on the operating side, the number of positions is decreasing by 61.5. On the capital side, the number of positions are increasing by 230.4, and I think that's reflective really of the level of capital activity that the city is undertaking in its 10-year plan.
Questions? Committee members first. Seeing none, Councillor Davis.
So on the capital side, 230 new, and, well, 199 for the delivery of capital projects. What I don't understand is last year, for instance, there were no net reductions in capital. So why, I understand you hire project managers or IT people or whatever for specific projects, but then somewhere you're supposed to take them back out. So I don't see where the taking out of the capital project people are.
So
or do you just roll them over?
So through you, Mr. Chair, when you approve your new projects, say for 18 in the capital budget, you're going to see in the budget notes a recommendation to add for the duration of the project. When the project ends, the position ends. So behind this briefing note is a program by program description of everything, of what all the changes are. On page 5 of the briefing note for delivery of capital projects, it actually describes in each of the areas what's going up and what's going down. So internal corporate services, you can see at the very bottom of page 5, is a decrease of 5 positions no longer required.
Okay, 4 to, so there's 11, 11, 9, 9.5. Oh.
Okay. So in city clerks on page 6, there's a decrease of 9.5 for positions that are completed. So essentially what this is showing you is that positions come on and positions come off.
Right, but why were there none in 2007?
Sorry? This is all as it relates to the 2018 budget.
But it's got 2,000 prior year impacts. So there were none that came off from the prior year capital projects.
It's under the category of delivery of capital projects. We put all of that in that. Prior impacts is if, in fact, you added a service enhancement in 2017 that added positions, and there are more positions showing up in 18. So that's really around service investments. Anything to do with capital is under capital project delivery. So that's that 199 number.
So the chief financial officer, you had 9 capital positions. So there's people working on these IT projects. At the end of the projects, are there not transferability of people who are managing IT projects from one to the other? Or are they always living on temporary projects?
That's your last question, Councillor.
I think it really depends. A lot of these projects are running concurrently. There is expertise that's built up, but remember that we've got people coming on who are subject matter experts. And if there's many projects going on at one time, we're trying to make sure that they all are getting that, as well as, you know, technical positions that are required for integration and analyst positions. Where there's an opportunity with one project ending, they will potentially move on to another project if it's viable, but then, you know, one gets counted as a decrease and another one gets counted as an increase. Doesn't mean the expertise goes away. It all depends.
Any other questions? Seeing none, next briefing note.
Okay, 3, Mr. Chair, at the top, page 31. So this is from a new briefing note from the acting CFO, and what it's essentially doing is describing page.
Can I have just a bit of, it's getting very loud in here again, it's hard to hear, so can I please have people just quiet down a bit? Thanks.
So it's briefing note number 15, and so it is essentially the briefing note that's providing the background information to the revised assessment growth estimate that we identified earlier. I'm on page 31 of the green wrap-up notes, and it's briefing note number 15. Okay.
Councillor Mihevc, quick question.
Yes, thank you. On the adjustment for assessment appeal losses, do we, I heard talk that that some of the downtown large property owners routinely appeal their assessment. Oh, right here. Could you give us a state of affair of the downtown core and state of affairs on the appeal side of things?
There are a number of assessments that get appealed. The downtown commercial and industrial assessments are the most complex and less homogeneous, and they are typically appealed year after year. The Assessment Review Board does have a process in place to adjudicate these sooner. We're hoping to see that actually happen. The appeal loss piece is something that provincially, legislatively, they gave us the ability starting last year to actually adjust the opening rate to account for those appeals. So this is actually something new that was there last year that's there this year that gives us the opportunity to account for the fact that our base budget is decreased by some of these appeals.
While the appeal is being heard, do they pay their tax? They do.
Yes, they are charged taxes and penalties while the appeal is being heard.
Okay, so okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Nunziata.
Just on that point, so are they the same ones that are appealing every year? Like, how many duplicates do you have, like, every year?
Well, Typically, a property owner will appeal until the appeal is heard. There were cases where appeals would not be heard for 8 or 10 years. That is not as bad anymore, and certainly the Assessment Review Board has a process in place to deal with those a lot sooner. Because we have 4-year reassessments, typically agents are out there looking at appealing a lot of these every time there's a reassessment because they are complex calculations.
So you can get a number of them that have appealed and they've been heard and then appeal at a later date, the same property.
Correct, and every year we actually do an actuarial assessment of what that is,
Yeah.
and set up a liability for appeals in our financial statements each year that runs through the budget.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell.
On the table on the second page, it refers to adjustment for assessment outliers. And then there's a notation, but I don't get what that means. What's an outlier?
An outlier happens to be a property that increased by greater than 100% or decreased by greater than 25%.
Okay.
Because we adjust our taxes each year for the effect of the phase-in of reassessments, taking out those outliers actually changes the average growth for each class, and therefore, by doing that, we're adjusting this and bringing in additional revenue. The province does this, other municipalities do this as well. It's something that we actually have realigned check, and that's why we didn't actually have really good information on this until early this week.
Under what circumstances would a property decrease its assessment by, or have its assessment decreased by 25%? Or is that just rare?
It's fairly rare. It's more likely that they increase by 100%. And the reason they might increase by 100% is because it's wrong and it's being appealed. It could be because they actually did some betterments that were never picked up as growth. And this gives us the opportunity to exclude them from the averages. And that's why it results in additional income.
In a house demolition, tear down and rebuild, is that possibly a 100% increase in assessment growth? Is that an example?
That should not be, because there should have been a reduction under the act that allows that first.
Okay.
These would normally be no changes to the property, and it's just gone up by that much.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, next.
Thank you. So that completes the set of corporate or citywide briefing note topics. So now we'll be moving into all the program-specific briefing notes. So we're at the bottom of page 31. The first being briefing note number 16 for Children's Services. This is a request to identify all the provincial monies that are specifically devoted to targeted fee subsidies versus all affordability. So that briefing note's before you, and the wrap-up notes summarize the number of childcare subsidies built into the 18 budget, total of $28,975. If you turn the next page, not included yet is an additional $825, and that's on the list of new enhancements. We've also been advised that there's additional funding that's coming from the province that'll add another $550. There's a report that'll be coming to Executive Committee on all those final amendments to the Children's Service budget, so we have one place with all that information. If you have any questions.
Questions on that?
What would
hold on,
the...
Councillor
Oh,
Davis.
sorry, I didn't see any hands up.
Any other committee members? Councillor Carroll?
Yeah, I know that the 825 are not included, but it's it's frustrating the way the briefing note is written. So the total number of, in the preliminary budget, we have 28,000 plus almost 29. Funding for childcare fees resulting from the new provincial investments also includes 825 new subsidies. Funding for the 825 new subsidies is not included. So this is the issue. Well, here we are writing a briefing note saying that money came, but we're not including it. Why not include it in the budget from the get-go so that we at least knew that the money was there?
It's in the new and enhanced list, Councillor, and it is listed as a gross with a net zero.
Why would we leave something that is gross, a windfall, net zero, out of the preliminary budget, thus making me listen to an hour and a half of childcare deputations across 3 locations? I'm trying to understand the funding of not putting a zero net item in the preliminary budget.
We were trying, through you, Mr. Chair, we're trying to keep all like things together. It's part of the expansion, and it does have the 20% contribution component that's part of that overall piece. The fact that part of it is funded from the provincial federal government is a great thing, but it is one package of information, and it is an expansion to the program, and it is part of the poverty reduction, and we thought we were bringing clarity to the system for all the things that are associated with poverty reduction.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Mihevc.
Yeah, so during the deputations, I asked a lot of folks who came forward to make deputations, what's more important, subsidies or overall affordability? And actually, I think in the court of public opinion, they were more or less split on it. As I understand it, the Appendix 3.4, where is Elaine, by the way? I feel like there you are. Okay, thank you. As I understand it, the Appendix 3.4, the focus was on subsidies, but here you're adding another $16 million that you anticipate getting from the feds, and that will address overall affordability. Is that fair? Am I understanding it right?
That's correct, and it will increase the investment in addressing affordability for 2018 to 63 million. Our goal is to reduce the top third of fees between 2018 and 2019 by 10%.
Okay, and this is the first of a several-year investment, and we're going to go on both sides of that chasm, so to speak.
That's correct. It's actually the second year, but it's the first year we've been able to make such a material impact on affordability.
Right, okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Just to be clear, the $15.8 million that is going to affordability was received in last year, and it's being carried forward, correct?
Actually, Councillor, and I think I may have said that to you, the $15.8 million is federal dollars that was received last year.
Yes.
Last year it was used for capital.
Right.
It is in our base operating budget, and this year it's been dedicated to affordability.
Right, but it's coming forward this year, but we received it last year for affordability.
Yes, we received it last year, and the funding is continuing this year.
So what this tells me, and this is the first I've seen, how they can't get their announcement a few weeks earlier than this, I don't know. But anyway, so what this tells me is there is additional funding, and 1 million more is going to be spent on affordability?
In addition to the $15.8 million that we're recommending this year, yes, with the additional money that was not expected, we've added another $1 million to affordability.
So even if we achieve 10% reduction, an average, someone paying $1,600 a month would get a reduction by the end of 2020 of $160. If we achieve 10% by 2020.
$160 per month. Yes, they would.
Yes, but out of 1,600.
Yes, that's correct.
Right. So I don't know about you, but to me, that considering all the millions doesn't move the yardsticks enough. So what I'm wondering is whether or not we could look at expediting the investments in affordability, and could we shift well, let me back up, because I will talk about affordability some more. The city's contribution for this year should have been, in order to achieve 20%, should have been 11.2 million. Is that correct?
That is the 20%, Councillor, and the budget does make a commitment to providing that,
Okay.
but over 3 years.
Yes, so instead of putting 11.2 million in this year, it is put into a capital investment in the Anishinaabe Childcare Center for 2 million this year, 2 million next year, 1.6 in the third year, and some additional operating money with the intent of reinvesting that in 2020 in the operating budget. Is that, have I captured that?
Last question.
There is
No,
a
it's not, please. This is the
Councillor-
first time we've seen very significant new information.
Councillor, we have agreed
Okay.
to 3 minutes of questions.
Then
There's a
I will
lot of
take all my
information
questions
here.
offline. Thank you.
Thank you.
Should I answer?
Any other questions? Council,
With the additional funding
Councillor,
from the
that was,
federal...
unfortunately, Council, that was your last question. It is now at 3:18. We're going to have to move on to that. There's an incredible amount of
Okay.
information we need to get through here today by 3:30. Next.
Okay, through Mr. Chair, page 33, so now we're into economic development. It's briefing note number 17. Request was to provide a list of the particulars around the 11 trade missions in 2017, the international trade, so that's been provided along with what's planned for 2018 and the overall expenses for both, which I believe Councillor Carroll asked for.
Any questions? Councillor Campbell?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. On page 6 of the briefing note, details an 11-day trip to the UK, Barcelona, various locations, $22,500, 11-day trip. I was wondering, first of all, why the length of the trip and what was the outcome of the trip?
Why the length? Because trying to maximize the efficiency of travel. So if we're in Europe, if people are traveling on economic development and cultural reasons in Europe, then it would, and these are important cities to promote Toronto, then it made sense to put them together. There was also some events going on that made sense to string them together for this trip.
So there were four cities visited. How many days of activity in the 11 days?
I believe that there probably, I don't know for sure, I'd have to go back to the detailed report, but there would have been probably, there could have been 11.
Beg your pardon?
Could have been 11. Often on these trips we work on weekends, but there would have been at least 9.
So it says to provide delegates with market opportunities in the UK-EU, strengthen existing partnerships, further Toronto's economic interests in Europe, and gain a strong understanding of two of the largest and influential countries, UK and Italy, and the European Union. So that was the goal. And so what were the outcomes of that? And to gain a strong understanding, who gained the strong understanding of the UK and Italy?
The two councillors that went on that trip.
I have a strong understanding of Italy, but anyhow, I didn't need to go to Italy to get that.
Well, I think this was also, and again, I don't have the detailed report in front of me, but I believe the part of the Italy trip was to be part of the Trudeau mission to Italy. So that would have been part of that.
Okay. Okay, I know Councillor Carroll will also have some questions. I want to ask about next year's plan. And in next year's plan, there are 2 trips planned. One is for the Spring Lines Fashion Show in London, and one is for the Fall Lines Fashion Show in London at Canada House. Just wondering how that sort of city business is going to further the interests of Toronto.
That's your last question.
So from not every trip has yet been approved. None of these trips, in fact, except for maybe the first couple, have been approved. It would be unlikely that we would send somebody to 2 of those fashion shows, probably 1. Fashion industry is a very important industry in this city. The city funds a fashion incubator, and so it's important for us to promote our up-and-coming fashion companies at these international shows. So when it says a fashion show, sort of doesn't get into the full complexities of a trade show.
No, I understand.
That goes around the show.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Carroll.
Thank you. Yeah, do we keep a record of the original motions? Because I thought that what I had asked for was trade missions and any other economic development related travel, but I can look back at my own notes. I
think the green sheet actually does list the word for word, the motion that was recorded by clerks.
Yes, it's awkward because we submit, what page would I find that?
The beginning of.
3. Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and look at my own notes because we submit them and then they end up being moved by
I'm happy to answer any further questions you would have.
Yeah, I see a request in 2018, because this has been narrowed down to actual trade missions, which I don't think was my original request. I don't see MIPIM, but I noticed that there's a request for MIPIM in 2018. I thought we stopped going to that.
No, we've been going to MIPIM as a big thing for the last 5 years, I believe.
And is that just that's just staff, or are we still having council attend?
Generally speaking, it has been only staff in the last 4 or 5 years. I believe this year the chair.
Yeah, because that's really generally who the participants want to interact with.
And the provincial government and many other municipalities in Ontario, or not many, but a handful of other municipalities.
Yeah, and I know that, I was surprised to learn that when I went on a trade mission in 2016, that someone had taken the entire trip in advance, but I don't see any listing of advanced trips here, but I'm looking at the briefing note for the first time. I did ask about any advanced travel to planned missions.
There were no advanced travel missions in 17. If my memory serves me correct, there was an advanced trip in 16 for the mayor's trip in 17. The mayor's trip was relatively early in 17, so I believe in the latter part of 16 there was an advanced mission to India for that trip.
So can we get the details, or the details aren't here because it took place prior to 2017? Is that why we're not getting the details?
That's correct.
Okay. So what is the policy going forward? So we have some missions.
So there is one mission in the one trip. Maybe I could just clarify use of the language here.
Yeah.
Mission generally means that staff and/or members of council are going with other delegates. So there's a group going.
Right, partners.
A trip would be one without a delegation, where it would be either staff only or staff and members of council.
Mm-hmm.
So there is one advanced trip planned this year to South America, to Mexico and South America.
Right.
As part of a potential trip with the mayor in 2019.
Okay, my time is up, but I have some more questions as to how all of this changes as a result of Toronto Global, and maybe I can take those offline before final wrap up, unless we're having a second go round on this briefing note.
Thank you. Through you. Okay. Thanks. Okay, thank you. There was a trip to Matera, Italy.
Correct.
What came out of that?
Well, there are a lot of close ties between that area of Italy and Toronto.
So there are close ties, but what came out of it?
So there are now closer ties with that area.
Okay, it's funny, but it's really not that funny.
No, I'm not making a joke of it.
Okay? Like, it's not that funny, in my opinion. I know he's not. I'm just saying in general, like I want to get to the bottom of these trips. I'm trying to understand what came out of it that we can actually measure.
So there were a number of, tourism is one clear and important measure from the point of view of Italy is an important market for Toronto for tourists, inbound tourists, so that was a key element. Food manufacturing is another element, and Councillor Crescente and staff visited a number of food manufacturing concerns in that area that are looking seriously at opening operations in the Toronto area, so that came out of it as well.
So, okay, looking at and actually doing are two different things. Has anything tangible come out of that?
At this point, it's still investigation, not
Okay.
firm decisions, but they're still live. There are live leads.
Okay, well, next year I'll ask about those live leads. I'll make sure I follow up with that. But do councillors need to go to these things? Like, I understand, like, is not most of the work done by staff? Like, I'm trying to understand the relationship between a councillor going on a trip and staff going on a trip. So whether it's Italy or the questions Councillor Campbell asked, is not the follow-up and is not most of the behind-the-scenes work really done by staff?
It varies according to the country. Some countries it's very important to have members of council to get the attention of the authorities, thinking specifically of Asian countries, South American countries, and some European countries.
Well, the countries that we're actually talking about, Italy.
So in Italy's case, we formed a memorandum of understanding with Matera. It would be normal for elected officials to be part of that process. So in this case, the relationship lead for council was Councillor Crescente, so that's why he went.
Even if we have an existing relationship, to further our relationship, we need the councillors to go again. Because you already mentioned there's an existing relationship there. So I understand making the relationship.
No, this was making it.
But you said there was an existing relationship and we were just strengthening it. So, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, I am just trying to understand this. If you have an existing relationship, why do we need to send councillors to go back?
So,
Fair enough.
So first of all, I made the comment about existing about Italy in general, not on Matera. On Matera, it was a brand new relationship formed in 2017. These relationships are community to community. The leaders or representatives of the leaders of the communities are expected to be part of them. So when they come here, they bring mayors, and when we go there, we bring a representative council, whether it's the mayor or his delegate.
Thank you.
Just to continue on that, so this South America trip and the fashion show, have you approved it? Has that been approved?
Neither of those trips have been approved yet.
Okay, so it gets approved through Economic Development Committee?
No.
How does it get approved?
The approvals for travel are done through staff. If it's international travel, the trip is signed off both by the deputy city manager and the city manager.
So it doesn't come through council at all, the funding? Well, but what you do is you put in the budget, the funding request for these trips.
The envelope, yes, but not specific trips.
And so we just put the funding in and then you decide which trips you're taking with those funds?
In combination with the relevant representatives of council with regard to this portfolio, yes.
Yeah, but what if we don't approve your budget for the trips?
Then we don't go on the trips.
So you don't go anywhere, right?
Correct.
Okay, so, all right, so that's the answer to that. But
So if I could address that.
So that would be very easy. But, okay, my question is as well, too, so when these trips, when these members of council go on these trips, do they report back? Do they give a briefing note or some report to economic development on what happened on the trip, whatever? Do we know what they did and what they ate or nothing? Like in Italy, was it a lot of pizza? What was it? Do we get some update on what they actually did and accomplished when they were on these trips, or they just go on these trips to have fun?
There are reports generated from every trip. We can make those available, Councillor. And if it's a mayor's trip, we report through council. If the chair goes on the trip, we report to committee. And if staff only go, they report it to me.
Thank you. Councillor Davis?
Is the travel budget in a separate line consolidated in a corporate account, or this is specifically for this division? Because there is another travel account somewhere.
Mr. Chair, this particular mission travel is all sitting in economic development. The only other travel budget would be what's been allocated to councillors through the council clerk's budget. There's no other.
So someone
travel
goes
budget.
to FCM and it's travel money, it's in the council's budget?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. It's about 20, we have probably time for maybe one more item, if we can get through it quickly. We'll try.
We're now in PF&R, page 34. So there was a request for a briefing note, top of page 34, to address unmet demand for recreational programs. So just a bit of backup here. There was actually a report that went to council that approved the Community Recreation 18 to 2020 Growth Plan and Waitlist Management Report, which identified the need to expand the number of spaces in registered instructional programs by 60,000, with 10,000 in 18 and 25 in each of the years 19 and 20. What this request is asking, and what the briefing note is identifying, is whether we can double the number of spaces in 2018 to 20,000. So the budget on the list of unfunded includes a request to fund 10,000 at a cost of 386,000 net. If you want to double it, then you would have to double the value of that particular request to 773,000 net. And then you would have a plan that would see 25,000 in each of the following 2 years. So that's the financial impact that's in the summary on page 2.
Questions? Committee members? Councillor Campbell?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. There was a report request to Parks, Forestry, and Recreation on the cost of providing free programming in, I believe it's 39 community centers. Is that correct, 39 community centers?
Through the chair, there are 39 free community centers.
So that report has never been written, and we're looking at facing long lines of unmet demands because there's not enough funding, and yet we have free programming for all in 39 community centers. Do you have any kind of estimate as to what the cost is to the city for providing free programming in 39 community centers?
Through the chair, we had come back to CDR with the Free Center 2-year study. We responded to any briefing requests for estimates of foregone revenue, so to speak, with respect to those centers at that time.
When was that?
Off the top, I don't have that report with me, but it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 million that we had talked about.
When was that information put forward?
I believe it was about a year ago.
About a year ago.
I can track that down.
That would be great. Okay. So you're saying the cost of running the programs, because in other words, if you didn't have the free program, but instead if you had a welcome program, you'd have some revenues coming in, but then there'd still be a lot of free programming. So was that, you said it's around $10 million?
We'll get the copy of the report and reconfirm the numbers from that report. But this briefing note and the idea about recreation growth plan is both expanding programming at fee-based as well as free centers. So it's not just focused on free centers.
Right.
The purpose of this strategy, as directed by council to take a look at and as approved by council, was around meeting unmet demand across the city. And there are some programs that we've identified here that have a cost recovery associated with them. So those programs would be dispersed according to where the need is.
In terms of the wait list, I imagine you've done the work, but it wasn't asked for in the report, so I understand why it's not here. But do you have a clear understanding as to what people are waiting for? Are they waiting for yoga? Are they waiting for, children's swimming classes? What are they waiting for?
So when we brought the growth plan forward, the primary programs that are in highest demand are summer camps and Learn to Swim, followed by general interest programs.
That all makes sense. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm done.
Thank you. We're going to recess now. Unfortunately, we'll have to continue after that. Councilors, just want to let everyone know we are maybe halfway through the briefing notes. When we get back at 1:30, we have 2 hours, and then we're going to have to recess. Please make sure there are any briefing note requests come into the clerk. If you get them in last minute, I can't guarantee that they'll be supported. Thank you.